simultaneous commencement of China's People's Liberation Army, PLA, Malaysia joint drill, and the Japan-Philippines military exercise is far more than a scheduling coincidence. It's a clear snapshot of an Indo-Pacific region increasingly shaped by competing centers of power and diverging security visions. These parallel maneuvers vividly illustrate the widening geopolitical divide in the South China Sea. One track driven by Beijing's campaign to cement its military and diplomatic influence through bilateral partnerships, and the other by a tightening network of US-aligned allies and partners, determined to uphold the rules-based order and resist coercion. This dynamic signals not just a regional rivalry, but a systemic contest between two models of power projection. One founded on unilateral assertion, the other on collective defense and legal norms. The stakes could not be higher. The South China Sea is the beating heart of global trade, with an estimated $3.36 to $5.3 trillion worth of goods transiting its waters every year, nearly one-third of the world's maritime commerce. Beneath its surface lie rich oil, gas, and fisheries resources that fuel the economies of Southeast Asia, while above it, shipping routes and air corridors form the arteries of international connectivity. Any clash in these contested waters, whether through deliberate provocation or miscalculation, would reverberate globally, spiking energy costs, choking supply chains, and testing the crisis management capacities of the world's leading powers. Thus, what unfolds in these waters is not confined to Asia's security map. It is a frontline issue for global stability and economic continuity. China's drill with Malaysia, officially couched in the language of cooperation, disaster response, and maritime security, serves a dual purpose. It projects Beijing's soft power image of partnership while reinforcing its military presence near overlapping maritime claims, particularly in areas like the Luconia Shoals off Malaysia's Sarawak coast. This approach allows China to frame its influence as constructive, even while its Coast Guard and militia vessels continue to press territorial boundaries across Southeast Asia. In contrast, the Japan-Philippines exercise, backed implicitly by the United States and increasingly integrated with Australia and other allies, represents the opposite pole of this strategic spectrum. Rooted in new legal frameworks like the Reciprocal Access Agreement, RAA, and buttressed by Japan's consistent endorsement of the 2016 Arbitral Award, these drills signal a deliberate effort to operationalize deterrence, testing interoperability, maritime awareness, and joint readiness across the Luzon Strait and the West Philippine Sea. These simultaneous exercises form a symbolic inflection point in the South China Sea's transformation from a regional flashpoint to a global geopolitical theater. They underscore a profound truth, that every ship movement, joint patrol, and tactical simulation now carries a political message. For China, it is the projection of legitimacy and regional dominance. For its neighbors and allies, it is the assertion that law, not might, should define maritime order. The convergence of these actions reveals a new phase of strategic competition, one where military drills have become diplomacy in motion, and where the balance of power in the Indo-Pacific will increasingly hinge on who can sustain presence, partnerships, and credibility in the face of mounting tension. The China-Malaysia Joint Military Exercise, scheduled for October 15 to 23, 2025, is officially billed as an exercise in cooperation, trust building, and regional security. But beneath the veneer of partnership lies a complex interplay of strategic calculation and quiet unease. According to the Chinese Ministry of National Defense, the exercise marks the sixth iteration of such bilateral drills, featuring over 1,000 combined personnel, including more than 700 from China, along with an array of naval vessels, helicopters, and unmanned systems. Framed around non-combat missions such as humanitarian assistance, disaster relief, HADR, and anti-piracy operations, the drill is meant to showcase China's willingness to engage its Southeast Asian neighbors under a banner of peace and stability. Observers from other ASEAN countries have even been invited, adding to the optics of inclusivity and multilateral cooperation. Yet, for all the choreography of goodwill, tensions lurk beneath the surface. The two countries share overlapping maritime claims in the South China Sea, particularly near the Luconia Shoals, a cluster of reefs and banks located about 80 nautical miles off the coast of Sarawak, Malaysia. This area falls squarely within Malaysia's exclusive economic zone, EEZ. but is also claimed by Beijing under its expansive 9-line. The contradiction between partnership and sovereignty contention casts a long shadow over the exercise's cooperative framing. This duality has played out before. In May 2021, Malaysia publicly protested a large-scale incursion by 16 Chinese military aircraft into its Flight Information Region, FIR, calling it a serious threat to national security. The incident jolted Kuala Lumpur's typically measured diplomatic tone, exposing the delicate balance it must maintain between defending its sovereignty and preserving economic ties with Beijing, its largest trading partner. While Malaysia continues to favor quiet diplomacy and pragmatic engagement, the fact remains that its territorial and airspace integrity has repeatedly been challenged by the very power it drills with today. In essence, the China-Malaysia joint exercise embodies the paradox at the heart of Southeast Asia's engagement with Beijing: cooperation cloaked in caution. It allows Malaysia to benefit from economic and military collaboration, while China projects an image of regional harmony, all amid the reality that their strategic interests, particularly in contested waters, remain fundamentally at odds. The Japan-Philippines joint exercises have rapidly evolved from symbolic gestures of friendship into a strategic cornerstone of alliance-based deterrence in the Indo-Pacific. Once limited to humanitarian and disaster response cooperation, these engagements now represent a coordinated effort to counterbalance China's growing assertiveness in the South China Sea and the wider region. Under frameworks such as Balakatan, held annually around April or May, and Kamandag, a multinational drill conducted mid-year, Japan has transitioned from observer status to full-fledged participation, marking a historic shift in Tokyo's defense posture. The 2025 Balakatan exercise, Japan's most significant involvement yet, saw Japanese self-defense forces training alongside Philippine and U.S. troops in amphibious operations, maritime security, and air defense, demonstrating an increasingly unified regional defense network. This expanding military cooperation rests on a new legal and diplomatic foundation: the Reciprocal Access Agreement, RAA, signed and ratified between the two nations in 2024 to 2025. The RAA allows for mutual troop deployments and joint training on each other's territory, thereby deepening interoperability and making large-scale, real-world coordination between Japanese and Filipino forces both legally and logistically feasible. It complements Japan's broader policy of supporting Southeast Asian partners under its Official Security Assistance, OSA, initiative. Since 2016, Japan has already provided the Philippines with 12 modern patrol vessels through Official Development Assistance, ODA, and continues to be Manila's largest security aid donor, supplying coastal radars, maritime surveillance systems, and technical expertise to strengthen the Philippine Coast Guard and Navy. However, behind this expanding alliance lies a strategic calculus aimed squarely at China's regional behavior. Japanese and Philippine officials have described the RAA as a pact between strategic partners sharing fundamental values and principles, amid what Tokyo has called a severe security environment. This diplomatic phrasing, though measured, clearly points to shared anxieties about China's maritime coercion, gray zone tactics, and military buildup in the South China Sea and East China Sea. The two countries' joint patrols, scheduled to take place off the western coast of Luzon and beyond the 12 nautical mile territorial limit, are designed to reinforce the principle of freedom of navigation and deter attempts to alter the status quo through intimidation or force. Tokyo's consistent endorsement of the 2016 Arbitral Tribunal ruling, which invalidated China's expansive 9-line, further underscores its alignment with Manila's legal and moral position. Japan's involvement provides not only advanced capability, but also diplomatic legitimacy to the Philippines' defense of international law. The Japan-Philippines partnership stands as a powerful counterbalance in the Indo-Pacific, an alliance built not on aggression, but on the shared conviction that stability and sovereignty must be upheld through cooperation, deterrence, and an unwavering commitment to a rules-based order. China's steady militarization of disputed reefs has turned the South China Sea into a pressure cooker with global stakes. Since 2014, Beijing has reclaimed roughly 5 square miles of land and stacked them with dual-use infrastructure, runways, hardened shelters, radars, and missile sites on features such as Mischief Reef, creating forward outposts that extend surveillance and strike reach deep into sea lanes. At the tactical edge, this hard power is paired with relentless gray zone pressure. China Coast Guard cutters and maritime militia boats repeatedly harass Philippine vessels near Second Thomas, Ayungin Shoal, and Scarborough Shoal, often employing high-pressure water cannons and dangerous blocking maneuvers. The human cost is no longer hypothetical. In June 2024, a Filipino sailor lost a thumb amid a boarding and equipment-smashing confrontation, while multiple ships have reported shattered navigation gear, damaged radios, and hull dents from collisions. These aren't isolated flares. They're a pattern that normalizes coercion, inching the region closer to an accident that spirals. Markets have noticed. As incidents ticked up, freight rates on key Asia routes more than doubled between January and July 2024. A stark reminder that risk isn't confined to the horizon. It shows up in insurance premiums, shipping delays, and consumer prices from Manila to Los Angeles. When a third of the world's maritime trade, $3.36 to $5.3 trillion annually, threads through these waters, every near miss has a supply chain echo. That's why the response is widening beyond any single bilateral tie. Regional exercises such as Balikatan have grown in size and complexity, now drawing US, Australia, Japan, South Korea, and the UK into integrated drills that blend amphibious operations, air defense, anti-ship targeting, cyber, and maritime domain awareness. The aim is not theatrics, but deterrence by interoperability. Show that like-minded states can plug forces together quickly, keep sea lanes open, and raise the cost of coercion. Beijing reads the same signals and pushes back in the information space. PLA's Southern Theater Command routinely brands joint patrols with the Philippines as a threat to regional peace, warning that attempts to stir up trouble are doomed to fail. But that narrative collides with a countervailing reality. The broader the coalition and the tighter the training loops, the harder it is to split the region with bilateral carrots and sticks. In practice, the geopolitical and economic implications are converging on the same logic. Collective deterrence protects collective prosperity. If militarization and harassment continue apace, freight volatility and insurance spikes will become the new normal. If multilateral coordination holds, the risks of miscalculation diminish, and the arteries of global commerce keep flowing. The stakes aren't abstract. They're measured in crew safety, shipping costs, and the credibility of a rules-based order that either holds under pressure or gives way, one water cannon blast at a time. The simultaneous military drills, China's exercise with Malaysia, and the Japan-Philippines training with allied partners perfectly capture the dual-track reality now shaping the South China Sea. On one side, Beijing is deepening selective bilateral cooperation to project influence under the guise of regional partnership. On the other, a growing coalition of democracies is strengthening collective defense mechanisms to deter unilateral coercion. These two trajectories, engagement versus alignment, influence versus deterrence, define a region at once interconnected and fractured by strategic distrust. The message these drills send could not be clearer. The South China Sea is no longer merely a maritime dispute, but a testing ground for the balance of power in the Indo-Pacific. China's joint exercises, often cloaked in humanitarian language, reinforce its military presence near overlapping claims, while Japan and the Philippines' coordination with allies demonstrates a maturing regional defense architecture committed to upholding freedom of navigation, the 2016 Arbitral Award, and the rules-based international order. Together, they reveal how Southeast Asia has become the focal point of competing visions for security, sovereignty, and stability. Looking ahead, the frequency, scale, and sophistication of these drills suggest that the South China Sea is entering a period of permanent strategic vigilance. Both blocs, China and its cautious partners, and the US-aligned coalition, are testing each other's thresholds through military signaling, gray zone tactics, and diplomatic maneuvering. This evolving equilibrium carries immense risk. With so many ships, aircraft, and national interests operating in confined waters, even a single miscalculation could spark a crisis with regional or global consequences. In this sense, the South China Sea's future will likely be defined not by outright war or peace, but by a sustained contest for influence, where every exercise, patrol, and partnership is part of a long game to shape the maritime order of the 21st century.
If you liked the video, do not forget to like, share, and subscribe our channel for deep analysis of contemporary issues.